clergy in Russia was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Global Atheist News Review. This is where we give our views on the news. It's not just a report, this is about opinions. So I have some opinionated people, and starting with, in order of arrival this time, starting with Dr. Ty from Kentucky, and next we have Guy Otten from Manchester, Dread Pirate Higgs from British Columbia.
Ahoy!
David Orenstein from Manhattan.
Yo!
And Tersia du Plessis from South Africa. Welcome, guys. Thank you very much for coming along to take part in this show.
Thanks for having us.
It's going to be a bit of a one-track show tonight. We've got one theme on the go here, and there's no prizes for guessing what it is. It's to do with Iran. Okay. That's where it's all been happening horribly, in fact, this week. Let me introduce you to a young lady, 16-year-old, Nika Shakarami. She's doing, karaoke. Don't we love singing in the car, because nobody can hear us, we think. So we enjoy. And here she is doing just that. Well, that's the young lady. She was obviously having a great deal of fun. Take Me to Church was the song. I'm sorry about the quality of the audio there, but are you ready for the bad news?
Oh, man.
Yeah. She was caught standing on a dumpster and burning her headscarf in Tehran, while others chanted slogans against the Islamic Republic. She later disappeared after telling a friend that she was being chased by police. Well, since then, her body has been identified, and there's been an argument over how she died. And of course, Mrs. Shakarami has accused the security forces of murdering her daughter. But they're claiming that she was thrown from a building that was under construction, possibly by workmen. This seems to be a regular theme that they adopt to explain the deaths of young women. And they got hold of relatives. Her sister, Mrs. Shakarami's sister, Atash, and brother, Mosen, had been forced into making false statements about Nika's death while they were in detention. They threatened to detain my brother's 4-year-old child, she said. And Mosen was shown on TV speaking against the current protests while somebody off camera whispered to him, "Say it, you scumbag." So we know what was going on there. So what do you think about that, guys?
Well, it's the morality police at it again, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, nothing is worse than the perfect storm of theocracy in a police state, because that's what essentially Iran is. It's ruled by terror. It's ruled by these old men who claim to have a distinct line to their God, their prophet, and believe strongly that anyone who moves outside of their very evangelical views of Islam deserves to be killed. Women, LGBTQ, anything that is seen as deviant is against Islam.
Yeah.
You know, so speaking, thinking, this what burns me is you see this girl who looks like any teenager probably anywhere on the planet. Sitting in the back of her mom's car, having a great time. I'm the dad of 3 daughters.
Yeah.
And when I think about her life being lost simply because what we take for granted is speaking out for herself and her humanity, is just the saddest thing in the world.
Yeah. Tersia, I saw you opening your mouth.
You're on mute.
I think you're on mute. Oh, hello?
We've lost your audio, Tersia. I'm sorry. Try and fix it, please.
I
think one of your cats hit the button.
I'll speak up while she's out. I said,
Okay,
this is something that happened in 2022, and it's something that can continue to happen. It's been happening, but the main thing is, just because it's happening somewhere else doesn't mean that it isn't happening or trying to be occurring in your neck of the woods.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember, when we were, I as much as I want to think about life back in the Trump era, but like it was a scary time where you were surrounded by as many sycophants as you were about people who are just as quiet and letting terrible things happen at the same time too. And like that silent majority was allowing for things that were terrible to occur and be commonplace in our culture. Like I'd wake up every morning to some crazy thing that Trump was saying and have 2 people be like, well, I don't pay attention to politics, even though that was our political representative. And the second one was, well, of course he can say that. He's the president. He should be allowed to say he can shoot people and if he walks down the street, or that China did this virus thing, or that Mexico should have a wall put up. It's not just religious. It's a condition to human beings to listen and acquiesce to forces of power. And I applaud the lady for still, speaking up and fighting. I think these acts are done to silence people like that. And, as dangerous as it is, I can only encourage, more dissent, more resistance, because, letting that go away only is in the benefit of those who try to silence you.
Yep. And I would also say that where that is a very glaring, act of more, our moral outrage, of course, is piqued by those instances of violence and whatnot. And yet we have to remember that even in Canada, I'm subject to that same sort of discrimination. Not to the level of that my body's going to be found, flung out of a car or over a building or anything like that. But nevertheless, it's representative of how a religious or religion has infiltrated law throughout the world. It's not just in places like Iran. It's everywhere.
It can happen anywhere. Tersia, say something. See if we can hear you. Speak.
Oh, maybe she can't hear us now.
That cat is evil. I told you guys.
She got an evil cat.
I got an evil cat. They're everywhere.
We can see you. We can't hear you, Tersia. Oh, dearie me.
No.
Okay.
What I was going to say about Iran is that we've seen it before, that these dictatorial countries, they carry on oppressing dissidents and oppressing people and women, and they go on doing it as long as they can. But there comes a time when the whole bang shoot falls. I don't know whether we're near that point yet, but I hope for the sake of the people of Iran that it's soon rather than late.
Yes, we all hope that. Yes. Well, in this particular case, the mother, Nazreen Shakarami, said, I saw my daughter's body myself. The back of her head showed she had suffered a very severe blow as her skull had caved in. That's how she was killed. And a death certificate issued by the cemetery in Tehran states that Nika died after suffering multiple injuries caused by blows with a hard object. And there you go. So much for the claims of the Iranian authorities. Let's see. Tersia, say something. Are you back?
I hope so.
Hey.
Right. Would you like to say what you were going to say before you disappeared?
I was just going to say that something that is very noticeable about the theistic religions is that having fun is not allowed. And I wonder why. I wonder why God is such a humorless person who just can't abide anybody else having fun and never seems to have fun himself. Where's God's sense of humor? Why can't he just enjoy life times?
I would agree, and I would say that is probably the biggest objection people have to pastafarians, is that we make fun of ourselves. We take it light, and if there is a God out there and we're made in God's image, certainly humor has to be part of it.
That's right.
Well, I think it's arguable that we're not made in God's image, because God has no sense of humor, and humans often do.
Yeah.
You guys ever realize how boring it would be if you were in heaven and you had to play a harp for all eternity? Just like,
that'd be crazy.
Oh, I got 5 minutes before I'm like, what are they doing in hell? Oh, there's a Nirvana concert. There's a Richard Pryor show.
All my friends are there.
It's like, oh, dang it. I picked the wrong one.
Why is it got to be harp? Can we not have an electric guitar?
No, of course not. That's too sexy.
Christopher Hitchens used to talk about the celestial choir of the North Korea.
Yeah.
So, as I said, it's a one-theme show. Staying with Iran, you remember Mahsa Amini. This is the 22-year-old Kurdish woman whose death in police custody sparked all these protests. Her family, guess what? They've been receiving death threats and have been warned not to get involved in the demonstrations.
It's just another way of attempting to control people's opposition to the vicious state, the so-called morality police, or just another arm of oppression. It's just so naked and obvious, really. Sad.
Well, in this particular case, the family, not her immediate parents, but a cousin, does have a track record of being a protester. He's a guy called Irfan Mortezai, and he's actually across the border out of Iran, but he's a Peshmerga fighter for Kamala, which is an exiled Iranian Kurdish opposition party that's based in Iraq. And he has been trying to bring down the Islamic Republic for years. And so that's why the Iranian government think they can blame this latest unrest on influences from outside, like people like him. And that's why they think they're justified in targeting Mahsa Amini's family. The family denies it. They're saying, that's a cousin. We're the family. Nothing to do with us. So moving on to another killing of a teenage girl in the same country. This one was called 16 again, Serena Esmailzadeh. And the chief of the police claims that she jumped from a neighbor's rooftop and killed herself, and that her death was unrelated to protests. It's got a similar ring, hasn't it? He's claiming that the deceased had a history of overdosing with pills to kill herself. And then less than a day later, state media released a video showing a woman claiming to be her mother Serena's mother, but people are disputing that she was a genuine mother and she was actually an actor. And she is seen denying that her daughter was killed in the protests and saying that her daughter had a history of attempting suicide. So again, this is the authority, the government manipulating the information, right, and trying to put their own propaganda out there.
Yeah. It reminds me, in the height of the apartheid regime, many activists were taken to the headquarters of the South African Security Services that was called John Foster Square. And many of them also mysteriously jumped from the some high story. I don't remember which story. It's funny how oppressive regimes have people, that there's so many people in oppressive regimes who choose jumping out of high buildings to commit suicide. It's funny, isn't it? It's funny, but maybe I'm just seeing things where there's nothing. You know, maybe I'm finding causation where there's no links. It's just we know that.
I share your suspicions, I'm afraid.
I think your sarcasm is well understood. I think that these protesters have the same illness that many anti-Putin oligarchs have, because they seem to be falling out of windows too since the Ukraine war as well.
Journalists often choose that method to commit suicide as well, jumping out of and if you're Muslim and gay, then that's also a preferred method of committing suicide. You know, it's just. But I'm not making any claims, please.
Yeah,
right.
I wonder if these instances of jumping out of multi-story buildings are a bunch of tall tales.
Oh. Honestly. So
sorry, bad black humor.
Black humor.
No.
To match your hat, Dred.
You need it, right?
Yeah. So there's been several funerals, of course, and guess what? 50 security force members were present at the funeral of this young lady. I wonder why.
Of course, to pay their condolences.
Yeah. And the family have not been allowed to hire a lawyer. I wonder why.
Yeah.
However,
you have to get permission to hire a lawyer.
Well,
not America.
Wow.
It doesn't surprise me in a totalitarian state.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants to be a lawyer?
Right.
It's as if the courts don't matter in a totalitarian government, right?
Right.
Yeah. Too true. So there is another side to this story, because 2 members of Iran's security forces have been killed. One member was killed by rioters with a gunshot. This is the Basij paramilitary militia. And another member was killed during protests in a different city in the capital of the Kurdistan province. And 20 members of the IRGC, Basij and police forces have been killed over the past 3 weeks of protests, according to state media. So have you got any thoughts about that?
Well, it looks like a civil war, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a bit.
And it's interesting that if there are 20 members of the security forces who've been killed, I wonder how many protesters have been killed. I bet there's a lot more.
Well, the last figure I saw was 175. But this is the next item, in fact, because this is a item from an interview with a guy called Soran, who lives in the home city of Mahsa Amini, but he's crossed into Iraqi Kurdistan to work, where he's prepared to be interviewed. So he says there hasn't been any internet for 3 weeks now due to restrictions imposed by the Iranian authorities. And it happened a few days ago when I was protesting that the regime beat me in the back, kicked me and used truncheons to hit me. They shot my friend and others too, all because I took part in the demonstrations. But when asked if this would lead to the collapse of the Islamic Republic, his answer was clear. No, the regime won't collapse. They are strong and they keep killing people. We will never stop, so they will keep killing us. That's very hopeful, is it?
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder if we should not we as in the people together here, but I've been watching a documentary on History Hit. Please, I'm not advertising, but it's excellent. It's called Barbarossa, The Lost Diaries. And it's the diary of a German Nazi lieutenant in the Panzer Division.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's an excellent documentary. But what strikes me about it is that this is a regular person, but he's been so indoctrinated that no protest is going to convince any of the people who have been so indoctrinated into supporting that regime. I wonder if there shouldn't be more emphasis on, I don't know by whom, but on just having conversations with people and taking the long way around, because is it really worth having so many people die? And if is there not another way of protesting without risking life and limb? I'm just thumb sucking here, but I just feel it's such a waste of human life and human potential. And it seems that, especially in view of what this chap is saying, that it might be just fruitless and wasteful expenditure of human life, and shouldn't we rather perhaps look at other ways of
well, I think that's what the government are hoping people will think.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they've tried all the peaceful ways and it hasn't worked for 43 years. So that's why they're pressed into doing these extreme measures.
Yeah.
Well,
And
revolution doesn't happen by
nobody
petition.
likes to feel like they're fodder, right?
Right.
You know, they like to feel that their protests and their lives have meaning. And if the government just keeps killing them indiscriminately, they're rendered fodder by the regime. And that has a tendency to dishearten those that would protest.
Yeah, that's the idea, isn't it? Make them give up. I do have some better news, because Germany's foreign minister has called for action against those responsible for this crackdown on protests in Iran. She's called Annalena Baerbock, and she said that Germany would ensure the European Union froze assets and imposed entry bans on those who beat up women and girls in the street because they stand on the wrong side of history.
Good.
I think that's very good.
Yes, it is. No, go ahead. You're right. It's good. Say something.
Yeah. Well, if you look at modern Germany, especially for Muslim refugees, Germany has become a haven for ex-Muslim refugees across the Arab Peninsula who wanted to escape religious violence. And even though technically Iran is Persia and not part of the Arab states, it's run by Muslim theocracy. So I think that if you can get Germany, who from 1933 to 1945 weren't many people's best friends, to have 50 years later or 60 years later to have it be a haven for people who are suffering other forms of economic, social, ethnic, or religious pressure. Perhaps it can happen anywhere,
Yeah. I would say that isn't completely smooth sailing, though, because not all of the Muslims that now reside in Germany are ex-Muslims.
Right.
They are suffering from some conflict now, and women are getting treated badly. because of course that's what Islam says you should do.
And we were talking about this before the show. It's sort of like the stories of the people who love to cave and go into holes and then get surprised when they get stuck in a hole and need an entire town or government body to pull them out. And the first thing they say once they get pulled out and all the money and resources are spent, risk of life of rescuers, all this stuff, everything is, man, I can't wait to make a full recovery so I can go back to going back into caves again. It sort of blows your mind. It's just like, hey, you were in a situation where because of the religious theocracy that you were in, you were subjugated, you were disenfranchised, you were put in danger, you ran and escaped that, but I'm going to take that dogma with me and I'm going to try it out here. Maybe that'll make it different, a little bit more. It's like, no. You know, Germany, by example, didn't solve all their problems by becoming more religious. Like they reformatted themselves by stepping away from that, stepping away from authoritarianism. Like that's the key to it. When you have like a republic of people who can think freely, women and men alike, that's when you start to free yourself from that sort of trap holes. And we were talking about holes earlier, Dad, but I'm going to refrain from what we
keep it family. Keep it
family.
Yeah. So you're right. Some people never learn, do they? They run away from something and bring it with them.
Some people never had the opportunity to know, but when you do have the opportunity to know and still, you know, perpetrate like these biased forms of thinking, that's your fault now. Like you can fool yourself once. Oh, that's a shame on the system. Twice. And when you imply it on other people, that's your fault. Fix that. We can fix that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the UK has gone a little bit further than Germany because apparently we have managed to find a few politicians who aren't involved in disputing who should be leading the country tomorrow. and they have imposed sanctions on Iran's morality police and other top security figures so that they are now banned from coming to the UK and any assets held here are frozen.
That's good news.
Yeah, it is a bit better, isn't it? So, going across the Atlantic to, you'll like this, Ty, Kentucky.
Hey, that's a state I don't live in.
3 Jewish women in Kentucky have filed a lawsuit arguing that their religious rights are being violated by a set of state laws that ban most abortions. Because, and in fact, this is this particular one that was filed in Jefferson Circuit Court in Louisville. That's where Frank lives, I believe. And it's he's given his apologies. He can't make it tonight. But there's 3 of these women, and they've clubbed together and brought this suit to the Jefferson Circuit Court since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the Roe v. Wade abortion instruction. The first of these women was in Florida. The second was in Indiana. And then we've got this one that's in Kentucky. And what's interesting about these plaintiffs is they all need in vitro fertilization. So they're on the horns of a dilemma because with in vitro fertilization, there's a lot of embryos, excess to the ones that are implanted and succeed in starting a pregnancy. And the question is, what should they do with these excess frozen embryos? And they can either keep them with exorbitant refrigeration fees indefinitely, or they can possibly face felony charges if they dispose of them. They're on the horns of a dilemma.
No, here's what you can do, and this is something that should already be put into the system. You just so you take basically some coronavirus vaccines and you give it to the embryos. They'll turn them into cats. You see, that's because, and then you give them to cat people to raise, because apparently there's someone out there who wants to adopt 136 of them at the time. That's fantastic. Now everybody's happy.
I don't know that they want a lot of mutant cats, though.
because every sperm is sacred.
Oh,
now you're in Monty Python territory.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, David, this is one for you, really, because, of course, Judaism has never defined life as beginning at conception, has it?
Well, as your resident heretic Jew, you know, I don't believe that there is any definition of when life begins. You have to leave that up to the Catholics. I think, and the old joke is that for Jews, life doesn't begin till you get your law degree.
Yes,
I made that joke before.
It still travels.
You know, the big issue is like because you know we're getting into this whole issue of not only is no one should be allowed to abortion, but when does life begin, right? And of course, if you take the religious track, it's at conception for most of the people who are religious, because that's when the soul enters the body. And there are people who are going into what's called in America the HOV lanes, where, you know, high occupancy vehicle lanes, pregnant women saying, well, you know, they're being pulled over because it's only one person in the car, and then telling the police, well, no, my baby is a person, deserves personhood, and therefore I'm allowed to be in the high occupancy vehicle. So you know, I mean, the absurdity of all of this is just as angry as it makes me, it's as laughable, because I do go back to Monty Python and I think of every sperm is sacred, and the ridiculousness of the idea that life begins at quote unquote conception, when we know medically that's not true. And we know scientifically that's not true.
But feelings, it's true.
Feelings, it's true. For some people, it's true.
So, a couple of very brief items now to put before you. You may or may not be interested to hear that a recent survey discovered that it was a survey of 1,000 Protestant pastors, and it discovered that 52% of them said the economy was having a negative impact on their churches. They're not getting the donations that they used to get. And this number of 52% is up 15% on the 2021 score. Who's sorry?
My heart bleeds.
If only there was someone they can get in touch with to help them out.
Yeah.
You're going to get bailouts.
Now that you mentioned that, you know, I'm doing my own little Bible studies, and something that strikes me about the miracles of Jesus multiplying the fish, it strikes me that in neither of the two cases mentioned in the Gospels where Jesus feeds the multitude, he first had to go and he first had to send the disciples out and see what they could find. Not in one of the cases did he say, all right, I'm going to just give food. He first had to send the disciples out, and they first had to find something. And once Jesus had some fish and once he had some bread, he could multiply that. So that just teaches me that God can't work with nothing, you know. So just up.
Right. Yes, his powers are limited. Yes, good point.
Yeah, he's not a conjurer; he's a multiplier.
Yes.
Well, what did Christopher Hitchens say? You know, Jesus cured a blind person. Well, why doesn't he just cure blindness?
Yes.
You know, go the extra mile and remove this suffering entirely.
Yeah.
Don't be modest. Go for it. Yeah. And in fact, the last item that I'm just going to deal with another item, but the last item is about how Jesus really does go for it. So that's a little taster I'm giving you there. But before we get to there, queer students like Veronica Bonifacio Penales have been protesting against the religious university policies that they find to be discriminatory and homophobic. And they find themselves frequently confronting the question, why would you go to a Christian school if you are LGBTQ? That's a good question.
Wait a second. I can't wrap my head around that. Sorry.
So where is this happening, John? Is it in the UK or the States or somewhere? Where?
It's in the States somewhere. I don't have a location. Oh, wait a minute. I do. It's Seattle Pacific University.
Yeah, it's on par with Muslims going to Germany and practicing their religion, right? It's like, why, if you're trying to free yourself of this, why ensconce yourself in the thing that you're trying to get out of?
Right. While Ty is stunned into silence, I've been criticized on Facebook for my view, because in South Africa we have a major thing where the Dutch Reformed Church has been involved in a court case now for about 4 years, because they don't want to admit gay preachers or gay ministers. Well, if they promise not to practice a gay lifestyle, then they might be admitted. But I have no sympathy with a gay.
Why would they apply? Why would? It's crazy.
Why? And I have no sympathy with a gay person who's angry with the Dutch Reformed Church who doesn't treat them fairly. What the hell do you expect?
Yes.
It's preposterous. Just why do you need the church in your life? Just get out of there. Begin your own church if you then have to. You know. I don't have sympathy.
Finishing off today, because we've just got a couple of minutes left before our scheduled ending time. There's a new campaign that's been funded by a guy called John Lee to the tune of $100 million, and it's called "He Gets Us." And so what he spent his money on billboards with messages like, "Jesus lets his hair down too," and "Jesus went all in too," and he's put these up in New York City and Las Vegas. So what do you think about that?
Whoa.
I think a fool and their money are soon parted.
There you go. Yeah, that sums it up.
Yeah.
Yes.
That sums it up.
Absolutely. So on that note, guys, thank you very much. Ty's already had to dive out because he said he had to leave at this time. And this is a good cue for us to wrap up. So thank you very much. As usual, I've enjoyed it. Thank you. Several clergy.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that guy?